Coming up on American Black Journal, we have teamed up with Bridge Detroit for a special series of shows on the urgent issues endangering the lives of African Americans. Today, we look at what Black Lives Matter really means and what protesters are demanding. It's an important conversation you don't want to miss. American Black Journal is next.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The DTE Foundation proudly supports 50 years of American Black Journal in covering African American history, culture, and politics. The DTE Foundation and American Black Journal, partners in presenting African American perspectives about our communities and in our world.
Also brought to you by Nissan Foundation, Ally, and viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. Today we're kicking off a three-part series that focuses on a rather provocative question. Do Black lives matter in America? Detroit Public Television is partnering with Bridge Detroit to dig deeper into the Black Lives Matter movement and the racial injustices that have led to protests around the world. Joining me is Orlando Bailey, who is the engagement director for Bridge Detroit. Orlando, how are you doing?
I'm well, Stephen. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share in this series with Detroit Public Television and American Black Journal, the famed American Black Journal.
Right. Well, this is actually a really great partnership for a couple of reasons, but one of them is that, American Black Journal is just now celebrating its 51st year on the air, focusing on issues that matter to people here in Detroit, issues that matter to the African American community. And Bridge Detroit just celebrated its first 100 days of doing the same thing right here in the city of Detroit. It is a partnership that I think is made quite naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. 100-day-old publication launched during the pandemic. I wouldn't advise anybody to launch a newsroom.
You wouldn't want to do that again, right?
During the pandemic, but we are essentially seeking to do the same thing that American Black Journal has done for the last 51 years, and that is amplify the narrative and stories that residents in our city have, and the stories they want to tell, the information that they need, and creating, mechanisms of communication that's iterative, that is beyond transactional, but, really builds a really solid foundation for a great relationship moving forward, as American Black Journal has done for the last 51 years. You guys have an awesome relationship with your viewers.
Yeah. The idea behind both organizations really is the idea of building community, being in touch with community, and making sure that people feel like they have a voice in the things that affect them. So let's get started with my conversation with the organizers of the Black Lives Matter Detroit chapter, John Sloan III and Curtis Renee. What is the current state of things with Black Lives Matter? John, I'll start with you.
Sure. So the current state of things with Black Lives Matter is actually maybe more of a complicated question than you might assume. This recent moment has been very interesting. We've seen a massive uptick in our traffic on our website, going from a couple emails a week to hundreds of emails a day. And on one sense, we really appreciate that new energy. On the other sense, it's slightly frustrating because we haven't gone anywhere, right? We've been here, we've been doing work. And I think what a lot of people don't realize about Black Lives Matter in specific is that we are an organization with affiliate chapters, and we run programs, and we have to do the same type of fundraising as any other group. The primary difference is that our individual chapters have a lot of autonomy as to what we choose to focus on. And that's based upon the idea that what we need in Detroit is completely different from what you might need in Louisville or in San Diego. And so I think this recent movement has been obviously of benefit in some senses because it's kind of refocused the attention on the movement for Black lives. And it's our job now to make sure that we can leverage that and continue that momentum, because this moment for us doesn't fade away. We continue to do the work long after the cameras have stopped rolling.
Yeah. Curtis, could you talk about Detroit and the momentum we've seen here, the specific protests and the response from police, and what you see as either the opportunity or maybe the frustration of where we are at this point?
So I just wanted to lift up that the 100-day mark for the marches did happen a few weeks ago, which I feel is something wonderful. And also saying that our protesters here in Detroit have been completely nonviolent during those 100 days. And in the moments of them being nonviolent, they were met with brutality and also a spin on the narrative from Chief Craig in spinning that the protesters are actually like outside agitators and that they were also being violent, which is completely untrue. And not only that, they were met with brutality and arrest, tear gas.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested and really excited to see how the protests grow from not just in being protests, but organizing and becoming a movement and going forward.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, I think that's one of the concerns that a lot of people have right now is, how do you take all this energy, this newfound energy, and channel it not just into protests in the streets, which are important and are getting important attention and are actually inspiring some change. I mean, we should make that clear as well. But translate that to the more sort of sustained, I guess, work that needs to be done in legislatures and other places. How confident are you that we're going to be able to do that? John, I'll start with you.
So I think we saw a really good example of that yesterday in Louisville, actually, where we saw a settlement for Breonna Taylor's family and their estate. That was not only one of the largest settlements ever given to a Black person in a murder, but people are going to say in a wrongful death at the hands of police. But what we saw attached to that financial settlement was also a series of legislative actions to which the mayor and the city of Louisville agreed. Do I think they go far enough? Not necessarily, but do I think they're a good start? Absolutely. And I think what people need to remember is that protest actions, marching in the streets, have always been an important aspect of any movement. And they put pressure on the city officials, they put pressure on legislators to continue to come to the table and to sit down and to look at not just reformation, but a reallocation of funds, which is what we mean when we talk about defunding police. We're talking about divesting and reinvesting in our communities. And they also talk about reformation not as incrementalism, but as wholesale upheaval and change to a system that's functioning in the way it was designed. I think that's very important to remember. This system isn't broken. It's benefiting those individuals that it was intended to benefit. And so what we're demanding is that reallocation of resources and of access. And what you're seeing in these protests is you're seeing that leverage and that pressure being put on our city officials and our legislators via the community.
Yeah. Curtis, I want to talk some about the role of women in this movement and other social movements. Black Lives Matter was started by women, which I think is a really important dynamic to acknowledge. But talk about the role of women in this moment and in this summer of 2020 here in Detroit and around the country. It does seem as though this movement is still powered by and framed very much by the women who are involved.
Yes, it's been wonderful actually seeing women out in the street during protests, women that are doing like political education and also um, different programs that are coming together in support of this moment that are not just protests, but also things like Green Light Black Futures and Green Chair Initiative at Feed and Freedom, which is headed by elder in our community and also a woman. And not seeing women just being pushed to the side or just playing roles that they are told to play, and taking this opportunity to be involved in the ways that they feel are most beneficial and most useful, and also like lifting up their skill sets. So it's been really wonderful to see that.
Yeah. So I want to spend some time talking about defund the police, which is a slogan that I think confuses some people. There's other people who've taken it and misinterpreted it intentionally to cast aspersions on the movement. And then I think there are people who are genuinely curious about, well, what does that mean and what would that look like? Curtis, I'll start with you. Talk about what you mean when you say defund the police.
So I feel like that means like a few different things. And also, I want to lift up that that police have been a part of how safety has been framed in our community spaces. And so it can be really scary for folks to think about like, well, if we're talking about taking police out of our communities, then who is going to provide safety? Because that is what those things have meant in our communities for so long in a weird kind of way. So one thing is defunding the police also means how are we able to reclaim the power over what safety means in our community and being able to provide actual safety on our streets and in our neighborhoods. And also lifting up something that John said earlier around reallocating funds. Police are called for to address mental illness within our communities. They're called to address domestic violence. They're called to address so many things that they do not have the training to actually support in those moments. And instead of those dollars and that money going into spaces that actually have the skill sets to support our communities in that way, those funds are taken away from them and pumped into the police system. And so when we say we want to defund them, we want to make sure that money is going into services and support systems that can actually create a safety net for our communities and addressing and supporting what's actually happening instead of further criminalizing people and surveilling people.
Okay, John Sloan and Curtis Renee, it was really great to have you here. And let me say before I let you go, just how proud it makes me as a Detroiter, as an African-American Detroiter, to see folks like yourselves at the center of this movement and young people like you guys. And I can say that, right? You guys are, to me at least, young people really taking leadership roles in this terribly, terribly important moment. So congratulations on the work and good luck.
Thank you, Stephen. If I could mention real quick, if we have time, we've come together with a coalition of other organizations to work on a Detroiters Bill of Rights. And we're really trying aggressively to get that pushed through committees, through to the entire committee and city council so that can get passed. It's 7 individual rights that we want to see enacted to fundamentally change the Detroit city's charter. And so if you're wondering what type of immediate and longstanding legislative action we're working on, that's exactly it. So I encourage people to go to our website, blmdetroit.com, and look at more information as long as the other organizations that are working with us on that initiative.
The protests against police brutality and systemic racism have risen to a level that we haven't seen since the 1960s civil rights movement and the rebellions that spread across the country. I spoke with two supporters of the demonstrations, Tristan Taylor, organizer of the group Detroit Will Breathe, and longtime Detroit activist, Carolyn Baker. Thank you so much for joining me today on American Black Journal. We want to talk a little bit about some of the anti-racism, anti-police brutality protests that have been happening here in the city of Detroit in the wake of the George Floyd murder. And sort of get your perspectives. Carolyn, you come from a long line of activists. Your dad is famed in Detroit. Your mom is famed here in the city of Detroit. And I really want to get your sense around what we're seeing now. You growing up in the type of family and atmosphere that you grew up in, have you seen anything like what we're seeing now in terms of this new civil rights movement?
So I'm old, but I'm not that old. My parents have been involved in a lot of, the civil rights movement and the labor struggles. And so, they've seen where people have risen up, Myself, here in Detroit, I wasn't alive during the rebellions here in Detroit. No, I studied history, and what I can try to compare it to, just based off the study and the testimonies that I've witnessed from my father's friends, is the unemployed councils and the hunger strikes that took place during the 1940s and 30s. And so in the battle with Henry Ford and the police opening fire, the Battle of the Overpass. So, just studying that history and the amount of evictions and the food lines that were established back then and the organizing that took place, that's a comparison that I try to draw from, and I'm still studying that history. So that's but me personally seeing anything like this, no, I haven't.
Yeah, this is, something that I haven't seen in my lifetime either. Tristan, one of the organizers for the Detroit Will Breathe group, can you tell us a little bit about what your message is? What message are you trying to convey, and what change are you trying to enact here in the city of Detroit?
Yeah, well, as part of the national movement around police brutality, the first and foremost thing, right, is the fight to protect Black and brown bodies against state violence, and to repurpose and reprioritize those resources that go into that violent physical repression of our bodies, into investing into our communities, and into our bodies, to make sure that, we have opportunities to be able to be our full selves. And in Detroit, that's not only fighting to defund and demilitarize the police, and really bring accountability to an institution that has unfortunately been able to escape accountability and transparency for a long time, but also to highlight the systemic nature of racism and inequality, and the need to deal with that on a systemic basis. And so that means fighting for a moratorium on evictions during the crisis. It means fighting for justice for victims of police brutality and making sure that their stories are told. It also means fighting for Detroit that allows all of its citizens to flourish and be safe. That's the basic message that we're trying to put forward.
You guys have been in the news a lot in recent weeks. I know that a judge issued an injunction a couple weeks ago, or a temporary restraining order essentially banning police officers from using several tactics that they have been using during the Detroit Will Breathe protests. Also, you guys filed suit against the city of Detroit, and the city is countersuing. And we learned of the news last week that Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and State Representative Stephanie Chang, along with City Council President Pro Tem Mary Sheffield and City Councilwoman Raquel Castaneda Lopez, jointly signed a letter asking for an independent investigation of the Detroit Police Department. Where are you guys in all of these litigation battles that seem to just all be in motion right now at the same time, and still hitting the streets every night?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is I know the city of Detroit has filed to amend the temporary restraining order. I don't think they, as of yet, filed a countersuit against protesters. They keep saying that, but there's been no legal action towards that. And I think, you know, we are seeking to use every tool that we can to the advantage of bringing transparency to the police department, and reining in their acts. And it's one of the reasons why we're calling for Chief Craig's resignation, and why over 35 organizations is calling for his resignation, and why there's a need for an independent investigation. And his like attitude towards all of these things are pretty atrocious. And I think is the reason why it's also important to maintain our presence like in the streets, because we know that these institutions unfortunately have been able to go away unscathed in a sense, and that if we're not bringing the kind of pressure and power of like people, that we're just going to end up being disappointed like we have so many times before by these institutions.
Carolyn, the General Baker Institute, named for your dad, General Gordon Baker, has been on the front lines of many, many fights here in the city of Detroit. One of the things that I really want to get your input on is we can understand and draw from instances and occurrences all over the country that there is an outright war on Black life, Black bodies, Black men and Black women. But in addition to fighting that fight, which the Baker Institute champions, you guys champion fighting, the good fights. There's also a narrative war that is happening at the same time, where there is a narrative that almost tries to suppress and delegitimize these occurrences where Black lives have been threatened or have suffered at the hands of state violence. What approach is the Baker Institute taking in this fight in the city, and as a part of really now a worldwide movement?
So one of our quotes that we stand on comes from my dad and one other, Nelson Pierre, one other revolutionary. Our task is to make thinkers out of fighters and fighters out of thinkers. And prior to the George Floyd incident, our lane has been political popular education, and meeting people where they are, not speaking above them, not, throwing out just a bunch of ideology at folks, and actually meeting them where they are, breaking down the system. And so, and giving them an understanding, like, even if we study my dad's history, he had an evolution that he went through himself. Yeah. And so, so getting people to understand that, like, you just don't become a revolutionary overnight. And there's narratives out here that make people, the system that we're fighting against is very good at propaganda, understanding the system and how it works. Like, its job is to control propaganda and culture, amongst other things. And so we have to try to do our due diligence and understanding like we're up against narratives that make people think that they're in the situation that they're in because it's their fault, something that they did wrong and not the system. And so trying to educate folks in that, and trying to educate folks in like what the role of the state is, what the role of the police is, what the role of the military is. And it might use this term protect and serve, but it ends there. It doesn't say protect and serve who. You know, they're protecting and serving who they're supposed to be protecting and serving, and that's the system. And not individuals within the system. You know, they protect and serve the capitalists who pay, you know, they keep them in position. And so just getting people to understand that is what we try to do.
That's going to do it for us. You can see extended interviews with today's guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org.
Plus, you can find additional resources and reports at bridgedetroit.com. Make sure to join us next week when we explore the role of journalists of color reporting on the Black Lives Matter demonstrations.
Meanwhile, we always want to hear from you. You can connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. Stay well, and we'll see you next time.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The DTE Foundation proudly supports 50 years of American Black Journal in covering African American history, culture, and politics. The DTE Foundation and American Black Journal partners in presenting African American perspectives about our communities and in our world.
Also brought to you by Nissan Foundation, Ally, and viewers like you. Thank you.